Patricia Ortiz y esto es Fake Café con Jesús. Hoy tenemos una gran invitada, quien es Rebecca Prosser. Ella es nuestra pastora en la iglesia de Kingdom Life en Nadell, Australia. Y conocí a Rebecca como una de las mujeres líderes en el pastoreo. Es decir, Rebecca es una de las mujeres llenas de fe, en el cual nos guía a nosotras, nos da consejería, nos presta también servicios de apoyo cuando necesitamos oraciones o cuando estamos en momentos de crisis. Con ustedes, Rebecca Prosser. Thank you, Beck, for having us today
Thank you for having me here.
No, thank you so much. And Beck, I know your family. I had the pleasure to know all of you. And I'm wondering how you started, how your relationship with God started.
Sure. So after a long journey in my childhood of divorces and my mum dying when I was quite young, I was actually living out of home when I was 16 years old. And I came along to a church service with my dad, who had kept asking me to come along. And so one day I went along, and the night before I'd said, God, if you're real, then I want to know you. And the next day I went to this church service, and the man that was preaching was talking about Jesus, and my heart was pounding, and I just knew that Jesus was my only hope. And right then and there, I wanted to make him my Lord and my Savior. And so age of 16, they said, if anybody would like to know Jesus, respond. I responded that morning. That night I got baptized. The next day I moved back home, and then I finished my last year of school.
Oh, wow, that's good. That's really good testimony. So I believe that God has the power to transfer the hard, you know, the painful to the happiness, to the freedom, to the forgiveness. So, wow, that's really impressive. So now you knowing God, what would you do, or what do you do with your family? Because you have children. Two of them, they are young, and the other one is a kid. So how you can manage this, or how can you lead your children to the Lord's presence?
That's a great question, especially for this day and age. So I have one who is 21 and she's actually married. And then another one who's almost 19, and then one who's just turned 10. So it's quite a juggle sometimes with the different ages, but particularly for the girls who both have their own relationship and revelation of Jesus for themselves. I think it was always just keeping Jesus at the center. So we intentionally didn't want to make, you know, knowing Jesus about going to church necessarily, or about this or about that, but actually knowing Jesus and try to example to them what it looks like to have Jesus as Lord of your life in the decisions. Everything that we did was focused around him. And we would talk about him in just a natural way. It wasn't like, okay, let's sit down and, you know, read our Bible and talk about Jesus. It was just when we were driving in the car, when we were walking along the road, like it says in Deuteronomy, always making the most of talking to them about Jesus. And showing them. I think that's the most powerful example we have as parents, because our kids know us better than anyone. And if we're a different person outside, especially when you're leading a church or involved in ministry, if you're different to other people, then your children will see that it's not real. So it's being authentic, you know, with them all the time, and apologizing to them when you make mistakes, so that they know that you're real.
That's correct. It's true. I know that this isn't a good thing. It means leading by example, which is true. So if you can fake, you know, in front of for example, in front of us, but not in front of your children.
That's right.
Because you live with them, and that's correct. But I wonder, for example, those families who they are Christians, they pray to the Lord in front of their children, but their children don't follow their examples, you know? So what would you suggest to those families?
I mean, I think it depends, obviously, if their children are older now. All we can do is pray. Well, not all we can do, it's the most powerful thing we can do is to pray, and pray for our children, you know, and trust God. That's what the Bible says, that, you know, if we trust him and we invest into our children, eventually at some point along their journey, they will turn to him, and to not give up, you know, and not to pressure them, but to every opportunity to show them unconditional love, that you love them no matter what, because you're showing them what the Father's love is like. And never give up.
Yeah, never give up. This is a good point. Yeah. I have another question for you, and this question is like a more personal.
Sure.
So, for example, your parents, they divorced, correct?
Yes.
Okay, you were a kid, and you thought that you would like to get married, knowing that your parents, they got divorced? Because most of, for example, I come from the same family, divorced family, separate. I remember that I always had a thinking like, no, marriage is only on a piece of paper. So I didn't understand, the importance of the marriage unto God. And I'm wondering about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was 7 when my parents got divorced, and I remember the day clearly and what that felt like, so when it came to getting married myself, or even as a teenager, I thought, maybe one day, but I definitely didn't want to do it the way that I had seen it being done. And it wasn't until I came to know Jesus and see other examples of what godly, happy, healthy marriage can look like, that I started to go, oh, maybe there is another way. But definitely in those first few years of marriage, there was definitely issues and things that I had to work through, always having this thought of, oh, this could just end in divorce. But then it wasn't till I got to the point where, my husband and I were like, divorce is never an option for us. We're just gonna work through no matter what difficulties we come up against. And I think when you know the unconditional love of God, and you know what a covenantal relationship is, then you know that no matter what will come our way, by God's grace, we will get through it,
I know a lot of young couples that their mindset is, okay, if it is, for example, if this marriage doesn't work, easy, I just can get the divorce and move on. They don't see the marriage as the marriage really is. And I had that mindset before I came to the church. I remember that when I went to the church, when I met Beck, I was in a hard crisis, marital crisis with my husband, and I remember that my husband, he was asking me the divorce, and from one side from me, I want to give the divorce because I felt humiliated and hurt. But from the other side is when I met Jesus, and I know that Jesus, he doesn't like the divorce. He can fix everything. He can restore everything. So I agree with you. I would like to ask you, what advice you as a pastor you will give to those marriage that in this moment they are crossing in a hard moment in their marriage?
Sure. Well, I've been married for almost 26 years in June, so feels like a long time.
My age. Joking.
That's right, I was young. And through that time, there's been many ups and many downs, many hard times, but through it all, if you look to God, if you ask Him to be the center of your marriage and help you, He is faithful. And He honestly is the one that will bring you through. So any obstacle or challenge you may be facing is just an opportunity to actually cry out to God together, and He can even make you stronger through those times. And it'll just be a testimony along your journey of the faithfulness and the goodness of God. So don't give up.
Don't give up. That's
God is faithful.
Always. All right. So, okay, at what time in your life, or at what stage in your life, you start being like a mentoring, or you start being like taking a leadership as a pastor? It means, you imagine that you will be a pastor in your life?
Yeah, definitely not as a teenager. I was 18 and a half when I got married. So,
young.
Yes, so young. And the church that we were, brought up in and young in, was very much about that God can use anybody. It's not restricted to age, He can use anybody.
Nothing.
So probably early on in our marriage, we really started to have a heart to just love God's people. We didn't know what that would end up looking like, but we definitely knew that God was speaking to us. At some point, we thought many years down the track, we would end up, you know, in some sort of role of loving and leading his people. But it turned out to be that, you know, I was 19 when we were asked to come onto pastoral team. Darren was 22. So at that time I was like, oh my goodness, like I don't know what I'm doing, you know. But God has been so good, and along the journey he's taught us, and incredible people in our life who've supported and invested into us. And we just count it the biggest privilege and honor to be able to do what we do. And it's a learning curve, that's for sure, but we're very grateful.
We're pastoring the young, okay?
I was.
But in what time or in what moment do you decide to take the challenge to pastor a church? It means to be the main pastor.
Sure.
Which is a lot of challenges.
Sure. So in 2011, we actually were asked to go over to Canada to help with the church over there. And so we sold our house, packed up, thinking this will be it forever. God had put Canada in our heart from many years before. And we went over thinking this could be it forever. And we're very happy to do that. And then God actually brought us back about a year later. And in that process, he said, I'm going to bring you back to Adelaide, and I want you to lead a church, to start a church. And I'm always a bit like, God, I can't do that. Who am I? You know, can't do that. And but I've learnt over the years that you just say yes to God, and then trust him to work out how that's all going to come together. So that was 2012. We planted Kingdom Life Church, and so that's sort of just
how many people started.
So when we started, there was 13 of us. We started in a lounge room, actually in my dad and stepmom's lounge room. And we just went, okay, God, we'll just be obedient to you. We don't know what this is going to look like, but it was in our hearts, and God's been
How many people are we now in Kingdom Life?
So I would say, who call Kingdom Life home, I would say around 200 conservatively.
How many around? How many nationalities are we in Kingdom Life?
Oh my goodness.
Because we are a multicultural church.
I think Darren always says about 17. But
I heard that he says
17.
But that.
Yes, it's many.
There are people from India, Australia, England, South Africa, South American.
Pakistan, Sri Lankan.
We are multicultural.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. And we are still growing and growing. We know that God, he shows for us the husband and wife in our life if we want to get married. First, he start preparing us to the process. It means we start in an individual process and with God, and then God, he put in our life the person, the indicate person that he has chosen for us to get married. So I would like to ask you how you did or how you ran that process. And if you have any advice for those people who in this moment who are waiting on God, because some of them, they want to see their answers now, soon, who is the guy or the lady that they are going to marry, but they need to understand that they need to live an individual process with God, and then God will do the rest.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I remember for myself, obviously, Darren and I met when I was 17. So, mind you, I had finished school when I was only 16. So, was working full time and all that sort of stuff. But I remember we had been dating for a little while, and we knew fairly early on that we were going to end up getting married. It just felt right. We just, heard God in it. But it got to a point where we both went, you know what, this feels like it's happening really fast. We just need to, take a step back and make sure that it really is God. So we actually, broke up for a little while, just having some space. And I remember one night being on the beach and going, God, I'm sure he's the man that I'm supposed to marry. But if you have somebody different in mind, I give it to you. And I remember in my heart, that was a really hard thing to do. We can say that, but to actually mean it is another thing. To actually surrender it to Jesus and go, I know that you're a good God, so I know you have the best for me. And so I think that's where we've always got to keep our hearts, is just open to God and let him bring the right person in. And his timing is always perfect. Always. He hears every prayer, knows your heart. And to just keep surrendering it to him, and he will make a way. He is more committed to us and to our husbands, to our wives, our spouses, to the plans that he has for us more than anybody else. So he will bring it to pass. But when we try and make it happen, then it's like we're saying, God, we don't trust you that you've got this. And often when we try and make it happen, we mess it up. So it's just a trust him. It's not always easy, I understand. Some people may feel like they've been waiting for a long time, but God sees, he knows, and he's got it all.
And he knows the right times.
Absolutely.
Well. Another question that I have for you is, what do you think, or what will be your advice for those families, those marriages that they don't want to have kids? It means one of them has, how can they deal with that?
Sure. Well, my advice would be, that would be one of the questions to ask before you get married. You know, there's certain things that for some people might be what I'd call a deal breaker, you know, and children could be one of those. But if you're already married and you're the one who wants children and you thought, well, you know, I thought my spouse would want children, but now they say they don't. Again, you've got to give it to God. You've just got to go to your Father and say, Father, this is the desire of my heart. Will you please change my husband, my wife, whoever it is that doesn't want, you know, will you change their hearts? And give it to him, you know. We can't manipulate them, we can't force them and those things, but just give it to God. God can change our hearts. Everything. And just keep loving them, keep, you know, reassuring them that you love them, because ultimately, you know, you and your husband are first, your one flesh relationship is first, but children are a blessing that come, you know, afterwards. But give it to God. Give it to God.
Okay, that's all for today.
Sure.
Thank you so much for being here for us. And I want to say that all these questions that I made to you there are some questions that I've got from people who is following me on Instagram.
Sure.
And I mentioned that my pastor will be here, and she is the woman leader in the Kingdom Life. So that's the reason that they send me those questions, because they have a lot of doubts. And I think this is more the question that more frequently they ask. So that's the reason that I ask you. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And I would like to have you here in the future as well with another subject.
Sure, no worries. Thank you.
Okay. Gracias a todos por estar aquí en contacto. Ya le hicimos las preguntas a Rebeca. Muy pronto estaremos poniendo este video en YouTube. Espero que nos sigan en Faith Café con Jesús. Un abrazo para todos. Gracias.